They made us laugh every single week. They were the faces we trusted, the voices we welcomed into our living rooms. But when the cameras stopped rolling, some of these sitcom legends met ends so shocking, so violent, or so heartbreaking that the laughter turned to silence overnight. These are not just sad stories. Some of these deaths were gruesome. Some were mysterious. Some were completely preventable. Here are 25 sitcom stars who had the most horrible deaths in television history. 1. Robin Williams. Robin Williams was the most alive person in any room he ever entered. Mork and Mindy introduced him to the world. But by 2014, something was happening inside his brain that no doctor had named. He had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, but the symptoms did not match. Paranoia. Confusion. A terrifying loss of himself. His wife described it as a monster taking over his mind. On August 11, 2014, he was found hanged in his home in Tiburon, California. He was 63. The autopsy revealed Lewy body dementia, one of the most aggressive brain diseases that exists. The damage was so severe his neurologist said it was a miracle he had functioned as long as he had. The funniest man alive had been fighting a battle nobody knew the name of. 2. Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was one of the most versatile comedic performers of his generation. Saturday Night Live, News Radio, The Simpsons. On May 28, 1998, his wife Brain came home after a night out, went to their bedroom, and shot him twice while he slept. He died in his bed. She then drove to a friend's house, confessed, and by the time police arrived back at the home, she had locked herself in a room and shot herself. Their 2 young children were in the house. Phil Hartman was 49. His wife had a documented history of substance abuse and erratic behavior that people close to them had been worried about for years. He had talked privately about leaving her. He never got the chance. He was murdered in his own bed while he was asleep. 3. Bob Crane. Bob plus Crane plus Hogan's plus Heroes plus Interview. Bob Crane starred in Hogan's Heroes for 6 seasons and played Colonel Hogan with effortless comic authority. But he had a secret life the public knew nothing about. He was obsessed with recording his own sexual encounters on video, a compulsion that consumed him after the show ended. His closest companion in this underground world was a video equipment salesman named John Carpenter. On June 29, 1978, he was found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale apartment. His skull had been crushed. John Carpenter was tried for the murder and acquitted. The case was never officially solved. Bob Crane died alone in a room he should never have been in, his skull caved in, and nobody was ever held accountable. His double life was almost certainly the reason he died. 4. John Eric Hexum. John Eric Hexum was a 26-year-old actor on the TV series Cover Up in 1984, impossibly handsome and seemingly on the verge of becoming a major star. Between takes on October 12th, bored waiting for a scene to reset, he picked up a prop gun loaded with blank cartridges and pressed it against his right temple as a joke. Blank cartridges release a powerful concussive blast at close range. The force drove a piece of his skull into his brain. He was declared brain dead 5 days later. His organs were donated. He was 26. He had not been careless with a real weapon. He simply did not understand what a blank pressed against skin could do. He died of boredom on a television set between takes. That is not a metaphor. 5. Freddie Prinze. Freddie Prinze was 22 and the star of Chico and the Man, one of NBC's biggest sitcoms. He had gone from struggling stand-up to national television star almost overnight. But the fame had come too fast for a young man already deeply troubled. Severe depression and a Quaalude dependency had spiraled out of control. In January 1977, after a call with his estranged wife, he called his manager and spoke in a way that frightened everyone who heard him. Then he shot himself in the head. His son, Freddie Prinze Jr., was 10 months old. He never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead the following day at 22. He was one of the most promising young performers in Hollywood. He left behind a baby and a country that had no idea he had been falling apart. 6. John Belushi. John Belushi was a force of nature on Saturday Night Live and in Animal House, wild, fearless, completely original, and destroying himself at the same pace. On March 5, 1982, he was found dead in his bungalow at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles. He was 33. The cause was a speedball, a simultaneous injection of heroin and cocaine. A woman named Kathy Smith, who had injected him multiple times the night before, later sold the story to a tabloid, was charged with murder, pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, and served 15 months. Robin Williams and Robert De Niro had both been at the bungalow earlier that night. Belushi died alone a few hours after they left. His trainer found him when he arrived to take him jogging. That is how fast it happened. 7. Chris Farley. Chris Farley was John Belushi's spiritual successor. Same explosive energy, same physical comedy, same reckless self-destruction. He said publicly that Belushi was his idol. On December 18, 1997, he was found dead in his Chicago apartment. He was 33, the exact same age as Belushi. The cause was the same too, a speedball of heroin and cocaine. The last person to see him alive was a prostitute who left him on the floor. An autopsy also found advanced atherosclerosis, meaning his heart was already severely damaged. He had been trying to get sober for years. His friends had staged multiple interventions. His hero had died the same way at the same age. Somehow that had not saved him. He idolized the man whose death should have been the clearest possible warning of what was coming. 8. Red Fox. Red Fox played Fred Sanford on Sanford and Son and made the fake heart attack one of the most beloved running gags in sitcom history. Grab the chest. Stagger. Announce he was coming to join his dead wife Elizabeth. Audiences screamed every time. On October 11, 1991, he was on the set of The Royal Family during rehearsals when he grabbed his chest and collapsed. His castmates thought he was doing Fred Sanford. They laughed and waited for the punchline. There was no punchline. He was having a real massive heart attack. By the time anyone understood what was happening, the window had passed. He was rushed to the hospital and died that night at 68. The most famous fake heart attack in television history had perfectly disguised his real one. It is the cruelest irony in American sitcom history. 9. John Ritter. John Ritter was one of the most beloved physical comedians in television history. His work on Three's Company was masterful. In September 2003, he was on set filming 8 Simple Rules when he felt sick. Chest pain, nausea. He was rushed to the hospital. Doctors treated him for a heart attack, which cost critical time. What was actually happening was an aortic dissection, a catastrophic tearing of the main artery from the heart that kills within hours if not immediately identified. By the time the correct diagnosis was made, the window had closed. He died on September 11, 2003, his daughter's birthday. He was 54. His wife spent years afterward fighting to raise public awareness about aortic dissections, specifically because of how fatally his doctors had missed it. A misdiagnosis in an emergency room killed one of the funniest men in television history. 10. Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman played Latka Gravas on Taxi and spent his entire career blurring the line between performance and reality so completely that when he announced in 1983 he had a rare and aggressive lung cancer. Many people assumed it was another elaborate joke. It was not. He was 35 and had never smoked in his life. He pursued experimental treatments in the Philippines that real doctors said were not legitimate. He died on May 16, 1984. Because he had spent his career staging fake deaths and disappearances, rumors persisted for years that he had faked this one too. Friends held on to hope for decades. Those closest to him have since confirmed he was actually gone. The man who made everyone question what was real had died, and nobody could quite bring themselves to believe it. 11. Bernie Mac. Bernie Mac was one of the most powerful comedic presences of his generation. The Bernie Mac Show earned him critical acclaim built on brutal honesty and unflinching delivery. He had also been living with sarcoidosis for years, an inflammatory disease attacking the lungs, heart, and brain. He had spoken publicly about managing it. In July 2008, he was hospitalized with pneumonia. He appeared to be improving. Then, on August 9, 2008, he died at 50. The speed of the deterioration after a seemingly manageable hospitalization shocked everyone who had been following the situation. His death felt like it came from nowhere, even though the underlying disease had been there for years. He had just delivered one of the most celebrated performances of his career in Soul Men. The film came out 2 months after he was already dead. 12. Brittany Murphy. Brittany Murphy voiced Loanne on King of the Hill for 13 seasons and was one of the most gifted comedic performers of her generation. On December 20, 2009, she collapsed in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills home and could not be revived. She was 32. The official cause was pneumonia combined with iron deficiency anemia and multiple medication intoxication. The mix of drugs had suppressed her body's ability to fight the infection. Then, 5 months later, her husband Simon Monjack died in the same house. The official cause was identical. Pneumonia and medication toxicity. Same house. Same cause. 5 months apart, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health investigated whether toxic mold was a factor. No conclusive answer was ever given. 2 people died in the same house from the same cause, and nobody has fully explained why. 13. Hervé Villechaize. Hervé Villechaize was famous as Tattoo on Fantasy Island, announcing the seaplane each week with joy audiences found completely irresistible. But he had lived his entire life in chronic physical pain. He was a dwarf whose organs were standard size inside a body too small to properly contain them. Breathing was painful. The suffering was constant and only worsened over time. On September 4, 1993, he shot himself in the backyard of his North Hollywood home. He was 50. He left a note and a recorded message explaining his decision clearly. He said he was unable to continue living with the level of pain he endured every day. He was not despondent about his career. He was exhausted by decades of physical suffering with no treatment and no end. It was a deeply considered and deeply heartbreaking choice. 14. Jack Sue. Jack Sue played Detective Nick Yamana on Barney Miller and was beloved by everyone who watched the show. His deadpan delivery and perfect timing made him one of the most unique comedic voices on 1970s television. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 1978 and died on January 11, 1979, at 63. What happened after his death is one of the most moving moments in sitcom history. The cast of Barney Miller filmed a tribute episode in which each of them sat and shared their favorite memories of Jack Sue in character, blending grief and love in a way that felt completely real, because it was. They laughed remembering him. They cried. The cameras kept rolling. It remains one of the most genuine responses to loss that American television has ever produced. He deserved every second of it. 15. McLean Stevenson. McLean Stevenson played Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake on MASH and voluntarily left at the height of the show's popularity. The producers killed his character in one of the most shocking moments in sitcom history. The cast was not told in advance. Several wept genuine tears on camera. Stevenson spent the rest of his career trying to recapture what he had walked away from and never came close. He launched pilots that failed. He became a cautionary tale. He died February 15, 1996, from heart failure at 68. By then, MASH had become one of the most celebrated shows in television history. Henry Blake was forgiven by audiences immediately. The real McLean Stevenson spent 20 years watching from outside what could have been his legacy. He left voluntarily. MASH never really let him leave. 16. Paul Lindy. Paul Lindy was one of the sharpest comedic minds in American television. Hollywood Squares. Bewitched. His timing was legendary, but he was deeply lonely for most of his life. living inside a closet the industry had built and drinking heavily for decades. In 1965, a young actor he had been spending time with fell from a hotel window in San Francisco. The studio buried the story fast. Lindy kept working, kept performing, kept drinking. On January 10, 1982, he was found dead in his Beverly Hills home by a friend who came to check on him. Heart failure. Alone in his bed at 55. No family, no partner. Nobody who truly knew him was there. The man who made millions laugh their loudest laughs died alone at 55, and the world barely paused before moving on. 17. Charles Rocket. Charles Rocket appeared on Saturday Night Live in the early 1980s and was fired after saying the F-word live on air during a broadcast. He rebuilt a quieter career in television and film over the following 2 decades. On October 7, 2005, he was found in a field near his Connecticut home with his throat cut. He was 56. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide. The method was so extreme it generated immediate disbelief from those who knew him. Nobody in his life had any warning. The manner of his death completely overshadowed everything he had accomplished in the years after Saturday Night Live. He is remembered for 2 moments, a profanity in 1981, and how he died in 2005. 24 years of rebuilding could not compete with either of those 2 facts. 18. Marty Feldman. Marty Feldman was one of the most distinctive comic performers in the world. Those extraordinary protruding eyes made him visually unforgettable. A brilliant writer and performer who worked in British television before crossing into American films and sitcoms. On December 2, 1982, he died of a massive heart attack in a hotel room in Mexico City at 48. He had been filming Yellowbeard. He complained of feeling unwell during the day and went to his room to rest. He never woke up. Alone in a foreign country thousands of miles from anyone who knew him in the middle of a film shoot. He was 48 with decades of creative work still ahead. The heart attack gave no warning and left no time for anything at all. It simply happened, and then he was gone. 19. Victor French. Victor French was one of the most recognizable character actors in American television. Little House on the Prairie, Carteret Country. He brought rugged humanity to every role. He was also a lifelong smoker, and lung cancer found him in 1989. He died June 15, 1989, at 54. What strikes people looking back at his final years is how present he remained on screen even as the disease progressed. He kept showing up. He did not retreat. The cancer moved quickly when it finally took hold, and the end came faster than anyone around him expected. He died at 54. No age at all for a performer of his depth. The industry moved on with the speed it always does, leaving behind a body of work that deserved far more attention than it ever received while he was still alive. 20. Scatman Crothers. Scatman Crothers was one of the most genuinely multi-talented performers in American entertainment. Jazz musician, singer, dancer, voice actor. Television star on Chico and the Man. Unforgettable as Dick Halloran in The Shining, he had a presence that could not be manufactured. Lung cancer found him in 1986, and he died November 22nd of that year at 76, a lifelong smoker. He kept working as long as his body allowed and did not stop performing until the disease physically prevented him. He died without complaint or self-pity, leaving behind a body of work across music, film, and television that represents something genuinely rare. People who only know him from The Shining rarely understand how large his life in entertainment actually was. He deserved more recognition than he ever received.